All right, let's talk about the film Fight Club. But we're going to go deeper than you might be used to. Here at The Spiritual Seek, we've put together an analysis that argues this movie isn't really about fighting at all. It's about a war for your very soul. We opened our analysis with this exact line for a reason. Because for us, it's not just a cool, edgy quote from a movie. We believe it's the master key that unlocks the entire film's message about the way we live today. So, what we're really asking you to consider is this. What if the movie is a profound critique of the spiritual void at the heart of modern society? What if it's about a battle we're all fighting? Okay, let's really get into it. So yeah, the first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. But we think the first rule of actually understanding Fight Club is that you have to look right past all the blood and broken teeth. You have to see the spiritual war against materialism that's raging underneath. This brings us to the first huge theme we identified in our analysis, this idea that our modern consumer culture, well, it isn't a playground of freedom. It's actually a kind of invisible prison, a cage for the human spirit. And here's how we see it breaking down. It's this whole cycle, right? We're constantly pushed to buy stuff we don't need, chasing a happiness that never quite arrives. And in that chase, our own uniqueness gets sanded down. We're sold an identity off a shelf, which leaves us feeling totally disconnected from each other, from nature, and maybe most importantly, from ourselves. And when you have that kind of deep spiritual emptiness, it doesn't just stay inside. In our view, it spills out and fuels the next big theme we see in the film, a really painful crisis in modern masculinity. So think about it. Fight Club becomes this almost sacred, primal space for these guys. It's a place where men who feel completely neutered by a society that tells them to be good little consumers try to claw back some feeling of power, of life, through pure, raw, physical aggression. So it's really crucial to understand that the violence isn't just there to shock you. From our perspective, the film is using it as a sharp critique. It's showing how capitalism and all these shifting social roles can push men into a corner, making them do some pretty extreme things just to feel like men again. And who's standing right in the middle of this whole hurricane? Of course, it's the charismatic, dangerous, and unforgettable Tyler Durden. Now, let's really dig into how we see his critical role in this spiritual war. In our analysis, we see Tyler as way more than just a split personality. He's a symbol. He's the raw, unfiltered scream against everything modern society tells you to be. He is that primal, destructive impulse that lives just under the surface of our polite, IKEA-furnished lives. And this is where our analysis gets really interesting. We started to see this bizarre, almost religious parallel in Tyler's journey. He starts a ministry with Fight Club, spreading his gospel. He gathers disciples who become Project Mayhem, and in the end, he faces a kind of sacrificial death to try and destroy the system. He's like a dark messiah for the spiritually bankrupt. Which leads us to the biggest question, the real paradox at the heart of the movie, and something we spent a lot of time on in our analysis. Is all this violence a cure for the numbness of modern life, or is it actually just a more destructive disease? And what we argue is that the film brilliantly shows you both sides of that coin. In the beginning, sure, the violence is cathartic, the pain is tangible, it's real, in a world that feels so fake. But that release inevitably spirals out of control. It turns into the blind terrorism of Project Mayhem, and it becomes the very same kind of oppressive system it was trying to fight. So when you take a step back and look at the whole picture, the consumerism, the masculinity crisis, the paradox of violence, what we see is that they're all just threads in a much bigger, much more universal story. So the big takeaway from our analysis is that the explosions and the fighting, that's not the real point. It's all just a massive, chaotic metaphor for that deep human search for meaning, for an identity and a purpose in a world that seems determined to sell you one instead of letting you find your own. But we didn't want our analysis to just be about a movie. We wanted to turn the camera around and point it right back at all of us. We have to ask ourselves, how deep does this stuff run in our own lives? So we included a little self-test in our piece to really make you think. Be honest with yourself as you hear these. How many of them ring true for you? It's a simple exercise, but it can reveal just how deeply these consumerist values are buried in our own minds, whether we like it or not. And that really is the final provocative question we leave you with. It's the one that cuts right to the heart of the spiritual war in Fight Club. And maybe, just maybe, it's the one that we are all fighting every single day.